World History Discussions, Chapter 5, ninth and final discussion, China and the Greater World. As you can see, unlike the other river valleys that we studied, like Egypt and Mesopotamia and the Indus, which kind of all traded with each other and had links, China is pretty cut off from all that because you have harsh deserts, you have insane mountains. When we get to the Silk Roads, when we get to Chapter 12, cutting through all of this, which is amazing, the stands of Central Asia, but that's another subject altogether. And if you wanted to go by water, you had turbulent seas to get all around and trade with the other river valley civilizations. So compared to the other places, China was relatively cut off. But you had these steppe nomads in here. We talked in Chapter 2 about the Indo-European migrations from the Caucasus Mountains all the way over through Europe and down into Anatolia and Persia and the Indo-Aryans in India, and there was even that one group that got to the Tarim Basin of far western China. And anyway, but other than Indo-Europeans, there were all sorts of other people in these steppes. And you can see the steppe region going from what is now southern Russia and Ukraine and Eastern Europe all the way through to Mongolia. Thousands of years later, when we get to 1279, we'll talk about the Mongolian Empire, which captured China and Korea and Iran and all these civilizations, and kind of might have been the beginnings of modern Russia. That's way, way, way ahead, and that's kind of the climax of these steppe nomads. But in this steppe region of Central Asia, Central Eurasia, you had all these horse-riding nomads. It's basically too dry for farmland, so it's all these grasslands, but you have horses and cattle and sheep and herders that just kind of follow the seasons. And a big theme in all these river valley civilizations, well, not Egypt, but in Mesopotamia and later, not even the Indus, because they had already declined when the Indo-Aryans filtered in. But a big theme you're going to see is that you have all these civilizations in this part of the world, Iran and China and India, but then to the north, you have all this steppe country with nomads that are envious of these civilized societies, and they come in and they sack them on their horses. And I know I already talked about this earlier, but I got this map here because Xi'an is where most of these ancient societies of China that we talked about, such as the Xia, Shang, and Zhou, between 2100 and 221 BCE were located, and the land is only arable for about 180 miles north and west, and I kind of mapped that out on a map, 188 miles, and you can see how it's kind of greenish in here. You can farm, and then you just hit the steppe. But pretty much every Chinese state that sat on the edge of the steppe lands always had to be strong to fight those warriors, and there's your warring states map from 403 to 221 BC, end of this chapter's era. And yet, no surprise, the Qin would eventually consolidate power because they had to fight these steppe nomads as well. So China may have been isolated, but they still traded with the greater world. And one of my textbooks says that these steppe nomads were kind of the truckers of the ancient world, linking places like China and Iran and all that together. So we're going to get into that when we get into the big empires and the Silk Roads a few hundred years down the line, 2,000 years ago. That's my favorite chapter. That's coming up in Chapter 12. But anyway, just thought I'd mention that. And then we've talked mostly about the Yellow River Valley civilizations in the north, but you also had civilizations to the south in the Yangtze. Now, when you go south in China, the opposite happens. Instead of getting drier and all more hostile, it gets rainier and easier to cultivate in the Yangtze Valley than it even is in the Yellow Valley. We know a lot more, though, about these Yellow River Valley societies than we do about the Yangtze Valley, but there was the state of the Chu, one of the warring states in the Yangtze Valley. You can't really see it, but that's the Yangtze River right there versus the Yellow River up here. Huanghe is the Yellow River. Changjiang, Long River, is the Yangtze River. But anyway, that's basically a quick summary of ancient China. And when we get to Chapter 8, the next chapter on China, when the Qin unite and then later the Han take over, you're going to see the Yellow River Valley and the Yangtze united under one Chinese empire. That's a few chapters down the road. Pumped.